And welcome back to Insemination, the podcast that is all things donor conceived. My name is Laura High, your chaotic sperm donor baby of the podcast world, and I am, first and foremost, profusely sorry for my chaotic posting schedule right now. I am a chaotic person. My posting schedule should not be. There is a lot of amazing things happening right now in my world and in donor conception that I cannot go into detail with at this moment, but it's all good things and it's just taking up a lot of my energy, and so far there's a lot of things that have fallen in on the back burner. That is my bad. Hopefully I can get into a little bit more of a stable schedule area soon, but in the meantime, make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast on whichever podcast platform you prefer, to make sure you are always notified as to when the next episode has been published. And especially you do not want to miss this one, because this one, I have to say, is really definitely important for all of my intended recipient parents to be listening to. This next episode is with Amanda Troxler, who is an attorney who practices in California, who does family law and does a lot of known donor contracts. So this is such an imperative episode if you want to listen to how you can right now do a legally safe known donor conception within the United States. And given the amount of misinformation that is spreading right now due to a lot of the serial donors who prey on the internet, we must be guarded and shielded with the correct information from professionals. So please listen to this episode. I'm so excited to share this one. Before we get started, though, I do need to do some housekeeping. Besides subscribing to the podcast, please leave us a review. Those things really help us out. You can also follow me on all social media at Laura High Five. Also, we film every single one of these episodes. So if you are more of a visual learner, the whole thing's up on YouTube. Also, specifically with this episode, there is going to be a visual element. I am going to be showing some text comments and reading them. So if you do want to just see them for yourself, you got to go check YouTube out. And as always, I just updated my show schedule. I have a lot of amazing shows coming up this month and next. Please go check it out. Hopefully I can see you at a show. That would be really cool. You all are fantastic, but I don't want to waste more time. Let's get to the episode. Well, welcome to the podcast, Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd love you to kind of show off a little bit just for a second and kind of list your resume just so that people kind of understand, we've got some big guns in the room today. Can you talk about what you do?
I'm a fertility attorney. I practice in California. I'm based out of Los Angeles. I've been doing this for a little over a decade. I started my own practice a little over 2 years ago with the birth of my son. And, I'm personally connected to this field as well.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We're having our second in July. So
Oh my goodness. Happy early congratulations.
yeah, we're really excited. But I'm personally and professionally connected, to this topic and to this field.
What do you mean? Can you explain how you are personally connected?
Yeah, so I worked in this field as an attorney first. A lot of times people will move from personal experience to professional. I'm the other way around. I started working in this field, and then about a year in, I decided to be an egg donor.
Mhm.
I donated to 6 families. I've
Oh
done
my
both
goodness.
known and unidentified donations. So I have a lot of strong feelings about, how this should be done. And I'm definitely a proponent of known donations. I think, anybody with some sense is. And so we're really trying to make that happen.
How was your experience? I'm always curious whenever talking to egg donors. How
Yeah.
was your experience with with your care? Because I hear so many horror stories from egg donors of just about literally their treatment.
Mostly positive. I got
Okay,
lucky
good.
and I had mostly positive
Good.
experiences. I enjoyed a lot of the people that I, worked with for my egg donations. I had some that were not so positive. There were some clinics that I went to where they really didn't want to provide any information to me. And I was sort of, shuttled in. So I've had a few, horror stories, but for the most part, I received really great care. And
Amazing.
luckily I had smooth cycles. I know it's not that way for everybody. But I had very uncomplicated, easy cycles, which is why I did it so many times.
But that's amazing. I mean, the amount of egg donors that I talk about, they were like, "Oh yeah, I had OHSS," and then they brought me in again, which was like, "Oh my!" That always terrifies me. The fact that clinics will continually bring you in even after complications is it's just so scary how they treat so many egg donors. And we need so like a standardization of care. But I'm so grateful that like you had a good experience. You're okay.
Yeah.
That's so fantastic to hear. But that's amazing, and I love that, looking back on it, you're also like, "Yeah, no donation." I appreciate that, a lot. And so the reason I really wanna bring you on is to talk about the legality of using a known donor, because as donor-conceived people are fighting for the end of anonymity,
Yeah.
and as more and more recipient parents are sort of realizing the problems that exist with anonymous donors, people are choosing known donors. But
Mhm.
they're also going about it in a variety of ways, and there's a lot of misinformation about the legality of known donors and
Absolutely.
doing it safely. So could you walk us through, um, how to do known donation safely?
So definitely arm yourself with information and knowledge going in. As a parent, I can say that, a big part of being a parent is making decisions for your child, for their well-being. And a lot of those decisions you make are before the child's even born. And that's your role as a parent, is really setting up yourself and your family for safety and for, prosperity. So always talk to an attorney in your state when you're thinking about conceiving a child through, third-party reproduction. I will say that I practice in California. I have the privilege of practicing in a state that has really wonderful laws.
Mm,
We have a law on egg donation. We have a law on sperm donation. We have a law on embryo donation. We have a law on surrogacy, and these are really strong, clear laws.
mhm,
California is also a state that is intention based. Hence the name intended parents, where California law really boils down to, if you're intended to be the parent and you cause into motion the actions that create this child, that you're the parent of that child. So, donation is really, really safe to do in California, as long as these are truly donors and you're doing it correctly. I would be remiss to say that all states have the same clear laws.
yeah,
That's not true. There's a handful of states that don't have anything about any sort of third party reproduction, no egg donation, no sperm donation, which is, sort of weird considering we've been doing, sperm donation in some capacity since the beginning of civilization.
yeah,
Um, but there are states that don't have anything. And then there's also states where there's laws, but they're imperfect laws. So we
yeah,
may have a law about donors, but not about egg donors, or we may have a law that refers specifically to heterosexual married couples. So there are states where the laws are a little bit, or aren't as strong as we'd like. But I
mhm.
don't think that that should prevent people from using known donors. I think there's a lot of things they can do to protect themselves.
What would be a state that maybe has unclear or less legislation than California? Also, I want to shout out to California. California was also the first state to pass
Yeah.
fertility fraud legislation. So
Oh,
go you
yeah.
guys. You are on top of it over there.
Yeah.
Um,
So there are some states that don't have anything. Like you look at a state, like I made a small list before we spoke, but and don't quote me on this. I really only do California law. But there's
Everybody, yes, always check with your attorney within state. That is always the thing to do. Yes.
but there's like Arizona, Alaska, Hawaii. That there are, I counted about 10 states that just don't have statutes or case law about even sperm donors. There's just an
Okay.
absence of laws.
So hypothetically, if I was in the state of like, let's say Arizona, and
Mhm.
I wanted to use a known donor, me and my partner, we had a friend that we're like, we want to use this person. They're lovely. We've known them forever. How could we go about that in the legal sense? I mean, obviously, as we said, hire an attorney, family attorney from that state. But what are some of the provisions that we would have to do, or the questions that we must ask?
So definitely make sure that you know what this person's intentions are. Are they truly meaning to be a donor, or do they have some sort of expectation of parenting? So if they have an expectation of parenting and you're not interested in co-parenting, then you're not a good match. It
Hmm.
needs to be someone who really does want to be a donor.
Absolutely.
And then yeah, have an attorney, and then you should have an agreement, with the donor directly with them, that states that they understand that you're the legal parents, that they are not the legal parents, and that they're contractually agreeing that they will never bring any sort of claim for custody, and that you will never hold them responsible, for any claims of custody. Also, your contract will say that you have the right to parent as you see fit. You choose the education, you choose the medical treatment, you have the right to leave the state or relocate your family to another state, to another country, that they
Oh,
acknowledge.
yeah, of course. I
Yeah,
didn't even think about, yeah, of course.
but that's in the contract that they've acknowledged
Yeah.
that you could move to, New Zealand, and that they have no right to stop you because
Yeah.
you're not the parent. And then also, expectations around future contact, but also saying very specifically that if they provide any sort of gift to the child, that that's considered a gift. It's not any sort of support that could lead to, or support obligations.
Oh gosh, all these little things. Yeah, I can
Everything,
totally.
everything you could think of.
Oh,
That if
that
the
makes.
child is in their home for some period of time, that's a visit, that's not them living in your home. But you address all of those things, that these are the things that are
Yeah.
markers of parenting, and that they understand that none of these apply to them. That these are that these are, maybe like uncle relationships, but this is not a parent-child relationship.
No, that totally like the saying those like little things about like gift visitation, like all that thing is like, of course that has to be in the contract. Of
Yeah.
course, because any of that stuff could then be just used against in a court of law if something went down. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. This is why we have experts. This is why we listen to professionals, people. Um, So then, okay, so you have the contract in place, and then you would obviously, I know I'm gonna say this with a little bit of sarcasm, but does that mean we should never do natural insemination?
Yes. The answer is absolutely, you should never do it.
Never
Um,
do it. If you're trying to do donor conception, you just don't do
Don't do it. Don't
it.
do
Yeah.
it. Or sometimes I
Why?
have the question.
Why would that be? Explain to us why natural insemination is never the right choice with doing donor conception.
It's not protected in any state. There's no state. And I've had these calls. I get these calls, not regularly, but once in a while. I had a sperm donor who called me, and we were talking about how he's going to donate to a friend, and everything sounded above board. And he says, by the way, we're going to do like natural insemination. So I just want you to put in the contract that that's okay. I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I can put it in the contract, but it's not part of the law. But so I'm like, my legal advice is that you don't do that. And he's
Yeah.
like, okay, but how do you protect me if I do? I'm like, I cannot protect you if you do. That's not protected in the law. You'd have to change the law. And I don't think there's a whole lot of support for changing the law to allow men to have sex with women without responsibility. Like, I just don't think that there's the impetus there. So I said,
Yeah.
do not do that. Or sometimes I get people who have donors, and they're like, well, I got a call once from somebody, and it was in the evening, and she was like, my donor's over here. He's really cute. And I'm wondering, like, if we had sex, not for conception, just during this conception process, like, would that be a problem? And I'm like, yes, yes, because then he's going to claim that you conceived that way. So, so I
Oh
hate
my
to ruin your Saturday plans, but you do not have sex with this man.
I mean, get it, girl, but like, don't, that's not, yeah, yeah, wait,
Don't do it.
you can't, you can't cross contaminate.
No, no, that's a hard no.
That's a
And
hard no. Okay, everyone, please
yeah,
hear that. That's a hard no because there's a lot of people I know who are like, yeah, we'll just do it. It'll be fine.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, and then so then what so then other steps, birth certificate. So again, I know I'm asking you stupid questions, but I'm asking them just to say that. So does that mean that the donor should never be on the birth certificate
Donors should never ever be on the birth certificate. That
in
it's,
any state?
no, in any state, you don't want donors on the birth certificate. It's evidence of parentage. But also, parents should be aware that the fact that they're on the birth certificate isn't necessarily enough.
Yeah.
That a birth certificate is an administrative document. So if you have a same-sex couple and they're both on the birth certificate, that's not necessarily enough. But definitely the donor does not go on the birth certificate at
Yeah.
all. So
No.
you could have your other partner. If you're a single parent, you can go on the birth certificate as a single parent, but the donor does not go on the birth certificate. Absolutely not.
What about then? So then birth certificate is enough so that you have to do a second parent adoption.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Um,
Okay.
so there's some states where you absolutely should do it, especially if we're talking about those states that really protect heterosexual married couples.
Mm.
If you don't fall into that narrow category, then you
Yeah.
should do a second parent adoption. And it's a hard conversation sometimes, especially for same-sex married couples who say, well, why is that fair? I'm a married couple. Why am I treated differently? And I have complete sympathy for how the unfairness of that.
Yeah, that's unfair. It is. I mean, I would agree with that. Yeah.
At the same time, you have to balance what's best for your family, and maybe the unfairness, you deal with it anyway in order to protect yourself as the parent, protect your family. um even in California, where we're a progressive state, I tell my same-sex married couples that they should still do a second parent adoption or a streamlined step parent adoption, because even though they're safe here in the state of California, I can't guarantee their safety in other states. Sometimes whether or not your parent depends on where you're standing. There's also, unfortunately, there's a lot of, we're under siege in terms of same-sex couples, LGBT families are under siege, and if I could wave a magic wand and we had marriage equality as a no-brainer, I would. We're just not
Yeah.
there yet, and so I do recommend a second parent adoption or streamline. California being as progressive as it is, we have an option for what we call a streamlined step parent adoption, which means that there's no home study. You don't have to go to court. All you need to do is provide documents to the court that shows that this is a donation and that you were married at the time of birth, and you can get that court order mailed back to you. So that's what we do in California.
And if I was like hypothetically, like let's say like a heterosexual couple came in, they were going through this process, they wouldn't have to do a second parent adoption?
Yeah. And it's unfortunate. I mean, it's unfortunate,
It
not
really
unfortunate
is.
they don't have to do it, unfortunate that they're treated differently.
Yeah.
But also if they're an unmarried couple, they may consider doing it. But it's good to have, something in place just to protect you and your family, and there are extra steps that really can protect you in the long run,
Yeah.
because even the cost of preserving your relationship in the beginning is so much less than the cost of fighting a custody battle later down the line.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think you said it really well, where this is unfair. This is not equal. This is wrong. But unfortunately, it is in this country, especially with how our country politically is right now. Unfortunately, that is something you got to do. And that sucks. That's horrible.
Yeah.
Now with that second parent adoption, there is also, and this is where I might get my terminology a little bit wrong, but then there is also the termination of parental rights from the donor.
Yes.
How does that fold into the equation?
So the donor might sign a declaration also for a court saying that he doesn't have any rights. He's a true donor. So
Hmm.
you do that. But there's ways of including donors in the process of establishing your parentage with a court as well. The
Okay.
more you can, so yeah, second parent adoption not only protects the family, but also protects the donor from not having any sort of obligations.
This is okay, stupid question, but if like let's say you are a single parent by choice
Mhm.
and you put yourself on the birth certificate,
Mhm.
obviously you're not going to have a second parent adoption. So then the waiving of the parental rights from the donor, is that something that would then just be in the contract? Like how then would that legally work?
Yeah, that would be part of the contract. You
Okay.
wouldn't go through a court process for that. I mean, you could theoretically, but we don't in practice.
Okay. All right, that's incredible. And so then is there any other steps that parents should keep in the back of their head, should keep, or any landmines that I haven't asked about yet?
So also work with mental health professionals. Please have these people your donors. Please have them, screened by mental health professional. You want to make sure that we know why they're doing this. Is there and what's their history of relationships? Do they have a
Yeah.
history of stable relationships with other people, or they have chaotic relationships with other people? Because that's something that could carry on to your relationship with them. Whether or not you know this person, you're connected to this person forever, through the conception of your child. So make sure this is somebody who you trust. And I would even say someone who you like.
Yeah, I mean, I always say, I'm like, this is literally somebody who you're trusting with your life. I
Yeah.
mean, it is to that extent.
Mhm.
Um, and so with that, what is your opinion on like donors on Facebook and all of that stranger danger?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not saying that you can't find people that way who may have really good intentions. I would just caution you to be cautious about what their intentions are. Why are they doing this? How many families are they donating to? That's a really big concern. I think we as an industry, we really need to do something about these large sibling groups. It's really not fair to the offspring.
No, I mean, the fact that there are some sibling pods that could fill, a small college and or like, be an entire graduating class is like that's not cool, guys.
It's not fair. It's not fair to the families. So you really want people who are acting ethically and have the right intentions. So donors who are looking to help, but also if he wants to be like a super breeder, I'm concerned about his mental health. So I'm just,
I would too.
I'm not a psychologist, but that seems like a personality disorder. So I think we've got to be cautious of that.
I mean, I do get comments all the time from people going like, I want to spread my seed as much as possible. I'm going to donate as many banks as possible. And it's just like, you know what? You keep your hands to yourself there, friend. Those are some big feelings. How about we go talk about them with a professional first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an egg donor myself, and the idea of having even more than 10 would feel unmanageable. I think
Yeah.
I believe I have about 8 donor conceived offspring. There could potentially be more. But the idea of it climbing, past 10 to 20, 30, that should be terrifying to
Yeah.
anybody.
Oh, yeah, that's terrifying. I mean, I would like there are some donors who think like, "Oh, that's cool." And I'm like, how do you think that's you there's a small army. How
Yeah.
is that? I also like for me with like all of these like serial donors, I'm I always think over the fact of like you've literally made these children you they're going to come after you at some point. Like they're going to come after you with pitchforks. They
And
know
I'm worried
who you
about
are.
that. Right?
Especially with these serial donors on Facebook. It's like they know where you live. Like, what have you done? Like they are not going to be thrilled with you once they gain enough consciousness and understanding for this world. They're going to come after you, friend.
Yeah. And especially since having, my son, like I also have think about, how my donations impact him.
Yeah.
Because he's also implicated in all the decisions that I've made. And this is something that affects his life as well, of course.
So then as a attorney, what was your opinion then watching Sperm World, the new documentary that was released on Hulu about the black market of donations?
Yeah, I think it was interesting the way it was framed. I don't think that they hit necessarily the scariest parts of it. I think it gets scarier from there. But
No.
what we saw was also, was troubling.
Yeah,
I think that they opened the first scene with something that's very much for shock value.
the
Um,
natural
with-
insemination scene.
oh gosh.
No, it's like, oh
Oh.
God, no. Well, because
And I think anyone who watched that when he gave his command of what to do, you're like, she should do what?
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a lot of donors who explicitly say, explicitly say only natural insemination. There's a ton of them that push natural insemination on their parents, and it's like, how immediate red flag, immediate red flag. Like, how is that?
Yeah, his intentions are not good.
Yeah,
Um,
clearly the
yeah.
intentions are not okay. If they're yeah, the only way this is gonna work is I have to have sex with you. Like, okay, like we know what you're doing. We know
Exactly.
what this is. Like,
Yeah,
we're
don't do that.
yeah.
And the remaining, men, I think they did a good job of showing that they were trying to fulfill something. I just don't think that what they're trying to fulfill should be fulfilled with the creation of human beings who are going to be affected by these decisions. I think, talking to a mental health professional, there's other ways to fulfill these needs. And
Mental health was definitely a need. I
yes,
I do yes, I do feel like the documentary did frame this a lot. Was it was very clear that that these donors were not donating to help other people. It was very much about fixing a hole within themselves. And they said that like multiple times was this made me feel good.
yeah,
And it was like and also I ask people like watch the documentary. There is never one person or one time ever the child is brought up. Ever their welfare is brought up. No one thinks about the like it is never brought up once.
Yeah. And babies they're human beings. They're human beings that grow up to
Yeah.
have needs, thoughts, desires. Babies are not, they're not legacies. Babies are not, cures for loneliness. Babies, these are human beings, and they're
Yeah.
not going to fix your problems. Children, I love my son. He hasn't fixed any of my life problems.
He didn't come in and was like, okay, I brought some stickers, some highlighters.
Yeah.
I went to the Container Store. We've got everything. Okay. We're going to fix this all up.
Like, don't get me wrong, he makes my life very enjoyable. But he's work, and my obligations are towards him and not the other way around.
Yeah. No, I agree. And one thing that I would love to bring up with you is so one of the stories that was highlighted that really caught my eye was one of the donors actually gained custody of his donor conceived child. Now, there's a lot about this story that I will say we don't know, so I'm only stating what was shown. And I have so many questions with this. But the daughter was taken away from her biological birth mother from CPS. We do not know the reasons why.
Mhm.
And it led to him gaining custody for at least a little while.
Yeah.
And again, that may have been the safest choice for her. I don't know. And again, we're not I know that that's an entirely new conversation, but I was sitting there wondering like how the hell did he gain like how did that even happen? If this was a sperm donation and a legal sperm donation at that. Did you have the same questions or thoughts or feelings about that situation? And then there's a part two to this, but I just want to hear your take on that.
Yes. I was concerned about how the donation was set up. Did they have an agreement? I don't believe they had attorneys. I don't think, and then part of me thinks that the oversight there was by design, that there was, that he was happy to have, the wiggle room. I don't think that he meant to necessarily be a true donor, and that's problematic. But I also think it highlights the fact that not only do intended parents have responsibilities when choosing donors, but I believe donors have a lot of responsibility in choosing who they donate to and
Yeah.
choosing intended parents. And that when you're a donor, it's not just, I want to help you, but also to make sure that you're setting up this child for a good situation. So this should be somebody who is also mentally stable, financially stable, somebody who's capable of raising this child, and it's fair as a donor to ask questions about their background and their support system. So I don't think it's right to just provide to create children without any sort of research, and then sort of, I also don't think it's okay to create them then walk away and say that it's not my problem, what happens from here. I think we all need to be considering the implications for the children.
100%. And so that donor, so I spoke about that publicly online, going like, there's a, how did this happen?
Yeah.
And that donor wrote back to me. And I
Yeah.
got comments on him. And I'm gonna for everybody who doesn't know, I filmed this entire thing. I put it up on YouTube. I'm gonna show the screenshots of what he wrote me. And I'm gonna read them for anybody. But this is what he said to me after I brought that up in a TikTok video. Um, he said, there's no real legal way to sign rights away except in two states. And in Florida, the second parent have to file second parent adoption within 48 hours. CPD, I think he's referring to CPS, and the courts know I was a donor. I didn't know the child was in CPS until I was contacted and sent a court order for a DNA test. A contract links the donor to the child. It don't protect no one when at home AI is done. The AI artificial insemination, message me and we can talk more on it and I can fill you in on my situation. And then he added, also was very willing to sign a contract for peace of mind for them, knowing the courts wouldn't uphold it. So, that I never contacted him back because I'm like, I'm not getting into it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not. But as a professional,
Yes.
and because I sent those messages out to a bunch of people going like,
No.
please explain, please enlighten us, please help
Yeah.
educate us in this situation.
Well, it is true that in some states, at-home insemination isn't
Mm-hmm.
protected. That's true.
100.
We know that. And in those states, you shouldn't do at-home insemination. You should go to a clinic. And that's an extra cost too, and I understand that. But that's one thing. Of course, you should have an agreement in any event, agreement and the clinic in some states have, go to the clinic, have an agreement, have an attorney.
Yeah.
Those things are enforceable. But to say that, well, we can't do it at home in this state, so we might as well not do anything. I don't think that that's the right solution.
No, that's not the right
Um,
solution at all. That's
no.
you don't just go, "Okay, let's do this illegally." And
Yeah.
just to clarify, you can still in certain state because there are some states that doing an at-home insemination, you can't do. It has to be overseen by a licensed physician. That doesn't mean you can't use a known donor. You can still use
Right.
a known donor, but it just there has to be that doctor in that clinic going, "Yes, not a one-night stand. This was a donor conception." That's the difference. And you are right. That does add in an extra cost because you have to go to a clinic, which sucks. But
Do you need help finding your biological parents? Whether you're donor conceived, adopted, or an NPE, please contact DNA Angels. DNA Angels is a nonprofit team of genetic genealogists that help you identify your biological parents. And this group is run by donor conceived people, adoptees, and NPEs, so they will emotionally have your back during this process. DNA Angels has identified almost 5,000 biological parents since 2019 using test results from Ancestry DNA. And they are a nonprofit because they believe that your financial situation should not stop you from identifying your family. If you are searching to identify and possibly connect with your biological donor or missing parent, please reach out to dnangels.org. Must be at least 14 to apply, have tested at Ancestry, and presumed parents born in the United States of America.
I mean, I would love for that law to be changed for maybe instead there can be like you can do it at home, but maybe there's like a midwife there or something. Something there can be like an addition to that law where it can be a little bit more cost accessible and for people who really don't like the idea of going to a clinic, there can at least still be somebody there to give that check. But
I mean, California does allow at-home inseminations. Like I said,
Mhm.
we have great laws. I wish that all states were like that. We really do have to be mindful of the laws of their states, but
Yeah.
we can work with those laws in order to provide additional protections to intended parents. It doesn't mean that we should just abandon all caution and hope that it all turns out okay.
So the fact that this guy who is I don't know, his total number of children at the moment, but the fact that this is what he's saying and peddling to recipient parents is, like, very concerning to me.
It's concerning that I wonder if he's had a conversation even at this point with a fertility attorney in his state.
Yeah.
And you should definitely do that before the outset of anything. But you would think at the point that you've done this so many donations that you've had a lot of those conversations, and I'm not sure that he has.
Now, I have spoken to other recipient parents, and this is not referring to that donor, but, like, I've spoken to recipient parents who have shown me text messages from these, kinds of, like, Facebook serial donors, and the serial donors are going like, "No, no, no, we don't wanna bring a lawyer involved, that makes it too complicated."
Yeah.
'Cause
Yeah.
that I mean, that to me is one because also in this, the donor should have representation as well.
Absolutely separate representation. Another attorney outside of the attorneys, they should not be the same attorney. They should not be the same firm. That they should have their own attorney who represents their interests.
Yeah.
So yeah, they should have separate attorneys. Definitely get your advice from an attorney. Don't get your advice from a man on the internet.
I feel like that is something that we should all do, like, that's but so unfortunate, and this is where, like, I would love known donors to be significantly more financially accessible, I would love that, but right now, in this moment, until we get those laws in place, this is not a Pinterest DIY situation.
Mm.
There is a formula that we all have to follow to ensure safety and legality.
Mhm.
Um, what are other if what are other, like, red flags for these donors that you would say if they pop up, you would caution these recipient parents?
Well, I think you serial donors, obviously, the number of children. I think. Oh, this is a hard one.
We can edit, that's fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I think, you just have to make sure that I think it should be somebody who you know at least a little bit. Someone who you've spent some time with. You know their family situation, you know their support system.
Yeah.
This is somebody who you should have toddlers knocking the door. This is someone who should have that if you meet them on the internet, you should proceed with caution as you should with anyone that you meet on the internet. I think when you're dating online, which is how I met my husband, you do some research on them, you Google them, you meet, in a neutral place.
Mhm.
These are the same sort of precautions you should take when you're looking for a donor.
Okay. That leads me actually beautifully to my next question. So one of the arguments that I get a lot when it comes to this realm is, well, what's the difference between that and a one night stand? Like, why on earth should we be doing all of this when we wouldn't be for a one night stand?
One night stands are risky. I mean, that's not a great way to become a parent either. You're opening yourself up for, custody battles. So yeah, I would say one night stands are if you intend to parent as a single parent, that's not the way to become pregnant.
Because that, yeah, as you said, that's custody battles, everything, and
And who is this person who you're tied to forever? If this person gains custody and they have access to your child, and you're tied to this person, you want to make sure you know who that person is.
I mean, I feel like even with using a known donor, there is a level of non-romantic dating you're doing. In the same way that, like, when you are, like, finding your partner to parent with, there is, like, is this somebody I wanna parent with? There is a certain amount of, as I said, non-romantic dating of, like, is this somebody that, like, I would feel comfortable having a biological child with?
Yeah, you want to share your same values. You want to, probably be similar politically. It's the
Yeah.
opportunity to really pick family, and you should choose wisely. I remember when I met with my known recipients for the first time that we had met in face to face. It was before I donated to them. We met through an agency, and we decided to meet, for lunch with the agency present. And we sat down, and one of the men said, this is kind of like a job interview and kind of like a date. And it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. And how has that dynamic for you? Because you said that you do know some of the families. And how is that for you watching these families raise and interact with your child that is
Yeah.
biologically yours? Like how is that for you?
It's been a trip, but it's been great.
No.
Um, I've known the children since they were born. I met them. I met the first child when he was born. We went to dinner. It was really lovely. I met the second child when he was born as well. We have some interaction. We've had dinner together. We've had dinner with both of their parents, so both sets of grandparents.
Oh my
It's been
god.
really sweet.
That's great.
Once I went to their house for dinner, and I had my 3-month-old, and one of the parents, they're from China, and they came over, and they took my child, and we went to have dinner, and they were taking care of the child. It was so sweet. And I was thinking, one day my child's going to grow up and say, my Chinese grandparents, and who was
Yeah.
like, but I love that. I really think that it's a form of extended family. I
Yeah.
I care about the children. I'm invested in their well-being. They know who I am. They know that I provided the egg. I don't know what
Mm.
that means to them. But it's different than it is raising my son. My son
Yeah.
who I make medical decisions for, who I live with, who I make medical decisions for, who I make educational decisions for. I make decisions
Yeah.
for him every day. I decide how much screen time he gets. I don't make those decisions for their children. They're not my children.
Yeah.
And sometimes donors ask me about my personal experience and how they should expect to feel. And I sometimes have donors who are afraid that they'll have big feelings once they see the child. And I tell them, you might. There's times that I've had big feelings about these children and the larger questions in the universe of what it means to be like a, genetic contributor.
Of course.
And I sit with those feelings, and I'm not sad, and I don't want to raise them, but I have big feelings for them. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, there isn't. And as soon as you were talking about that dinner and the fact that, the grandparents were holding it's just it gives me such like a warm feeling of like, and it really to me exemplifies the it takes a village.
Yes.
And
Sometimes, yeah.
it embraces the families all come in different shapes and sizes, and saying that, we can be an alternative family and it
Mhm.
still works beautifully.
Yeah, someone else said it before me, but you can never have too many people love your child. You really can't.
Yes.
And I have a funny story to tell you about like one of the boys when he was young. We came to the house, me and my husband. It was before I had a child, and he like popped down the stairs and he looked at me and he said, "Oh hey, you used to be my egg." And I was like, "Well, other way around. Like you were my egg. Like I was actually here first."
That's really cute, and I do like, "Hey,
Hey.
hey." I love that so much, but
Yeah.
that's great, and the fact that, those are already, like, normalizing it, already in conversations, it
Yeah.
takes so much weight off.
It does. And the opportunity, I remember there's one point I got a call from them. It was like 9 a.m. and I was worried. They don't normally call me at 9 a.m. And so I answered the phone and they said, that they had learned that there was a genetic disease that runs in one of the father's families. And they just were wondering if I would be tested for it, especially because we're both Ashkenazi background. It wasn't Tay-Sachs, but it was something else.
"What's up,
Um,
Ashkenazi?"
Yeah. And I was able to tell them that I'd actually done a donation to another family, and I had had a larger genetic panel that I had a copy of, and so
Mhm.
I could already tell them that I'm not a carrier for that genetic disease. And but that's just a call. They could call me up and ask, like,
Yeah.
are you willing to get tested? And I said I've already been tested, but if I hadn't been, I would have been willing to, of course.
But again, it just really shows this is the benefit of known donation is the health stuff is literally it's worth its weight in gold because
Yeah.
like as we all know as people who are a little older, then we know that like as you get older more diagnoses pop up. You also see things that happen with your parents, with your aunts, uncles, siblings, and it's being able to have that contact is it's such indescribable safety.
Yeah, people in their 20s don't have a complete medical history. They haven't
Oh,
been here long enough. And even small things like after my first child, it was in my mid 30s, I developed psoriasis and I didn't know what it was. I went to a few different doctors. Psoriasis, it sucks, but it's
yeah.
not, the end of the world, but it's something that I did pass along to the family to say, just, I have psoriasis.
Yeah.
And so if your child starts to exhibit, symptoms like this, it's probably psoriasis.
Absolutely. Even those little small things, like it doesn't always have to be like heart failure, which we do know that donors have been diagnosed with later on in life and that information has been blocked by the banks. But even small things like I would always get blisters on my hands every single summer and I still do. And I'm always like, what the fuck is this bullshit? And then as soon as I was able to connect to my donor's cousin and even though she's not in contact with him for like years. So I was like, do you know his medical history? She's like, I really don't. She's like, I'm so sorry. But she's like, I do remember though, as a child, he had very severe eczema. And then talking to my other donor conceived sibling, I was like, "Do you get eczema? Do you get blisters on your hands?" She's like, "Oh yeah, no, every single summer." And it was like, "There it is. Oh my goodness." Like it's not it's fine. It's totally
Yeah.
cool, but having that it was like, "Oh,
And
there
as you
it
know, there are more severe things that need to sometimes be. So there's the donor who's been trying to find recipient families because she has a brain condition.
Angela, she has HHT. She just had she just had brain surgery.
Mhm.
Actually, she literally texted me right as soon as we
Oh,
started
shoot.
filming. So, hi Angela. How you
Hi. I hope
doing?
you're feeling okay. You're doing the right thing.
She's
Yeah.
doing great. We are yeah, no, she is being such a I cannot thank her enough for what she is doing. And also I feel like her story is such a powerful story as to why the connection, why that having that communication is imperative.
And I've had donors come back. I've only been doing this for 11 years, but before I worked at my current firm, I worked with an older attorney. So I also have managed some of his cases that are,
Yeah.
much older. We've had donors come back with hereditary forms of breast cancer, information that the recipient parents and certainly the children need to have. And we passed that information along, which through the attorneys, when it really, I mean, thank God we were able to give that information to them, but it would be so much better if they could just give that information directly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
Mhm.
and it's there we see so many problems right now, and I feel horrible for so many recipient parents are paying like extra for an open ID at 18 donor, but
Yeah.
then that clinic, that bank, that agency closes.
Yeah.
And then that information is like it's gone. Where are they? It's just disappeared.
Mhm.
And it's I mean, with that, I mean, I don't exactly know how to fix it. Like, should that go, all that information be entrusted to like a third party, like law firm or something? Like, because
Yeah.
such a shit situation that so many recipient parents and donors and donor conceived people find themselves in.
Well, I believe the Colorado family protection law does have something about maintaining records, medical records permanently. And I'm also not a Colorado attorney, but my understanding from reading it is that if those places shut down, they have to have a mechanism in Colorado in place for how that information is passed along.
Yeah.
So making sure they're contacting recipients, someone else to hold that information. And in the age of, storing information digitally, there's really no reason for information like that not to be held indefinitely. We don't have to worry about a banker box somewhere that goes somewhere. Information needs to be kept somewhere, in the cloud.
100%. But it's like, again, we can also, like, if we just had, open contact from the beginning, because even there are donors who get diagnosed with something even a year after they start donating. It was, I believe, the Gunner case of Stephen Gunner, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia. The
Mhm.
donor donated when he was 19 years old, and like a few years later was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Like it was just a few years later.
Is this the donor from the podcast, Donor 96? I don't know, maybe it's not.
This was donor. So the Stephen Gunner was diagnosed with schizophrenia in his 20s, and shortly after he OD'd. Um,
Oh,
and then the mom, I adore this mom. I tell everybody this mother is like my entire world. I would stand in front of a bus for Laura Gunner. Laura like immediately went on like this rampage to find all of his siblings to like warn them, and found the donor's mother, found out that the donor OD'd a few years prior, found out that after he donated, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So that information like was just completely lost. But at the same time, the donor did actively lie about his medical history.
yeah.
Because at 14 years old, he was institutionalized for threatening his father with a baseball bat, locked himself in the attic for like uh hours. It was like an incredibly like dangerous high heat. Like firemen had to come rescue him. But also he was in and out of therapy, psychiatrist, psychologist, was on medication throughout his whole life. He was showing signs of mental illness since he was like 4 years old. And it paralleled Steven's life literally perfectly. Like it was like back to back. And you see like photos of them growing up. They looked like twins. And the fact that one, the medical information was not verified. So the fact that that information about him being institutionalized was never given to them. And the fact then there wasn't open contact to be able to get that diagnosis, because if they had that diagnosis of schizophrenia with all of his other accurate medical information, they could have gotten Stephen help significantly earlier. And he very easily could still be alive to this day, getting the proper support needs that he always deserved. And his parents showed a total willingness to do everything. They
Yeah.
were absolutely there trying to support their son as best as possible, but just were never given the tools that they needed and the information they needed.
Well, it reminds me a lot of Donor 9623. Did you ever listen to that podcast?
Oh, from Zytex?
Yes, it
Yeah.
reminds me of him because that's somebody who had, mental health struggles, and obviously the information that was provided, wasn't accurate.
Yep.
There wasn't a lot of verifying, and some of the stuff you can do on your own as an intended parent if you meet them. So you can Google people, you
Yep.
can look up their backgrounds. You can also have a conversation. I think there's some things that you can tell when you meet someone face to face that you wouldn't know from an application. So you might be able to pick up on certain traits. But I also thought that podcast did a great job of emphasizing that donors are people.
Yeah.
None of them are perfect. I don't think donor 6923 is a bad person. I thought that the episode where he, hears the child say, I love him anyway. I broke down crying. I don't know if you remember that. Like he's a real person. I think he was really coached to provide certain information, but we're all fallible people. We're
Yeah.
flawed people. And you have to accept your donors the way they are. And then if there's really transparency, like this is a donor who maybe they do have some family members have substance abuse issues, and that's something you should be aware of
Yeah.
when you're choosing them. You're not going to find anybody with a perfect medical history or a perfect
No.
donor, and you
Well,
have to know what the risks are.
and I feel like the way that the industry is, it actually encourages donors to lie
Yes.
because they have, I mean, again, there's no standardization of care. Like there is no regulations or anything that says you can't use donors with like X, Y, and Z. There's no standardization of genetic testing, but you do have like ASRM who says like maybe don't use donors who have like these kinds of things, and then the banks have their own policies.
Yeah.
And they're kind of ridiculous to in my opinion, like what they say that they require, because what they're asking for is impossible. Everybody has something come up in their medical history, but what you're encouraging is we can give you this $100, $150 per donation if your medical history is wink, wink, perfect. And so then you have these donors go, oh, okay, so I just won't mention any of that stuff. I won't do it. When the best thing to do is saying, we're not going to turn you away from medical differences. We
Yeah.
just need to ensure that the parents have informed consent. I think that there needs to be different criteria to approve donors.
Yeah.
But I don't think the fact that they have an anxiety disorder should not be a deterrent. Like I find that to be a ridiculous thing. Um,
And our recipient family can say, you know what, our family, we also have anxiety. You know, so
Exactly. Yeah, we have
you fit
anxiety.
right in.
Yeah. Like, the fact that they turn away donors that are under 5'10", I'm like, "Seriously? Like, guys, there's"
Yeah.
my g there's so I find that stuff
Exactly.
to be so ridiculous, and it's, again, perpetuating the eugenics, which the fertility industry is founded on, and it's I find it to and it cuts the availability of donors, which the banks are always complaining about.
Yeah.
Um And also, I can't imagine what that feels like for the recipient parents because usually with recipient parents, you're always trying to find a match for the non-biological parent, and if you are under 5'10", maybe you're neurodivergent and you can't find a match for yourself, like, what does that feel like?
Totally. No, absolutely. I mean, we need to accept that these are donors are human beings, that the material is coming from a complete human, complex human being. And this idea that we're just selling this unidentified baby seed that's going to create a genius baby with with no medical problems, that's just not a reality.
That's they're the industry is, like, selling that package beautifully, and it's just it's an utter lie, and I have to always break that news to recipient parents going, "That medical history you're holding about your anonymous donor is literally it's confetti, like,
Yeah.
it means nothing." But I love also talking to your having that conversation beforehand with the recipient parent and donor.
Mhm.
Um, I love that you talked about the importance of it. Was that something that you also made you as a donor feel more comfortable being able to like go, okay, I'm giving my egg over to you? Did that make you feel more comfortable as a donor?
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of the families that even if I'm not in contact with them now, I did meet them even through Zoom. And that made me feel good to know who it is
Yeah.
this this material is going to. I wanted to feel good about, helping create a family. For me, it wasn't just compensation. That's a factor for a lot of donors, but it shouldn't be the only factor. Donors should also would want to help, and part of wanting to help is to make sure that these children are being raised in stable environments. And one of my biggest fears is having a donor offspring come back to me with some history of trauma and saying, why didn't you look into this? And that's something that I definitely, because I've done completely unidentified donations, and so if they say to me, why didn't you do more? I don't have a good answer for that. And I'd like to protect other donors from that.
It's a real lie that the industry because the industry says like, "Oh my gosh, your eggs, your sperm, they're gonna go to such great families." And I'm like, "What do you how you can't the only thing you need to become a recipient parent is have money. That's literally it. There's no what are you talking about?" And I feel like that sets up such a false expectation for donors. Um,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, I mean, I know plenty of donor conceived people who were physically, sexually, emotionally abused by their recipient parents. It's like, that's just not true.
Donors assume that there's vetting of intended parents and the way that donors are vetted. That's just a assumption that's often made. It's not true, really, and it's tough because it is hard to say. How do we determine who can and can't be a parent? So that is tough from a professional standpoint of saying like, well, you're not qualified to be a parent, but you are. But I think as a donor, you can decide I'm comfortable donating to you. I'm not comfortable donating to you, and that's your right. And it's
Yeah.
something that you should do.
I think consent for donors absolutely should be standard practice. I think you absolutely should have the ability to consent where your genetic material is going to, because that is your as much your biological child as it is of a child that you raised. Um, and I think it goes the other way around as well. I think the amount of recipient parents who I've talked to who have found their donor in life
Mhm.
and realize like if I had met this person, I would have never have chosen them as a donor is like heartbreaking.
And that's so hard for the resulting person to
Yeah.
be at the center of that. I think anytime you're conceiving a child, best practices is to choose someone you like, whether this is a romantic relationship or not.
Yeah.
Obviously, relationships can change, people can change. Someone you like when you conceive the child may not be someone you like down the line. That's a risk. But setting yourself up for my initial impressions and my initial experiences with this person is positive.
Mhm.
I mean, I think that across the board is best practices if you're looking to become a parent.
'Cause the amount of, donor conceived people I've spoken to who end up finding out that their donor is, like, homophobic is
Yeah.
really, quite outrageous, and many donor conceived people are queer spawn, they're queer themselves, so finding that out is real shitty, and it's not a fun experience. And it creates I don't exactly know how to classify, like, what issues it caused, but it definitely it really hurts, and it's not a situation that I would want for any recipient parent, donor conceived child to sort of find in of going like, "Oh, wow," and, like, so many of us do find out that our donors are real shitty people. And that it is a real because I would say the narrative that the industry has perpetuated is like these donors are such amazing people. They're so great. Look what they did for you. You should be so grateful. And then you find them and you're like, "Oh, you're just a
Yeah.
shitty person who did it for a pack of beer."
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, the nice donor and the parents who want a child very badly, that's it's not enough.
No.
That these stories are so much more complex.
And I think especially when we go into the realm of serial donors and the serial donors are like, "Oh, no, no, we just want to help a family out. We just want to help a family out." And you're just like, "No, you just want to get laid
Yeah.
and you just want to, for whatever reason, build an army." Like, I don't so before we say goodbye, is there anything else that, like, I haven't asked you that you're like, "I really wanna make sure this is covered. I really wanna make sure that this is said. This is important to know. What have I not asked you?"
Well, I want to share a little bit about myself, maybe, and because
Oh
I
my
don't.
goodness,
Yeah.
yes!
So
Share about yourself!
I do want people to realize that the passion that a lot of us bring to this field is real and personal. That a lot of people who are trying to make change are both personally affected by it and have the views they have because of lived experience.
Yeah.
My background is that I was raised by my father, who's a single gay man, and I was born in 1986, so this is before you had the option of like an egg donor and then a surrogate,
Mm,
for normal people. My mother is also gay, and I was conceived as very much of an arrangement,
mhm.
and so that's a lot of reasons why I identify with donor conceived people. I met my mother when I was 19. I know what it's like to walk through the world and not know who a biological parent is, and sort of think like it really could be any of these women, and sort of the impact of meeting somebody who is a genetic parent and understanding parts of yourself. So I went into this field a lot because I wanted to help, LGBTQ families like my own. I thought there has to be a better way than this. When my father was raising me, the reason we didn't have contact with my mother was the fear that she could claim custody, and I think these were legitimate fears. And there was drawbacks to it, but I understand why my father did what he did. Um, and so I think that there has to be a way that we can protect donor conceived people's interests and allow them access to genetic relatives while still protecting LGBTQ families. A lot of times the narrative pits LGBTQ parents against donor conceived offspring.
Yeah.
And I hate that. I hate that they're pushing
It's
the family
horrible.
because we should have common goals, which is, that we want these families to be
Yeah.
protected and we want to be able to have access to donors in a way that's safe. And we want to make sure that these are donors coming into these families who have the right intentions and who are, going to show an interest in the child, but maybe not an unhealthy interest.
It makes me I get so upset when I see I would say the industry or other entities trying to pit the LGBTQIA community up against the donor conceived community when it's like two marginalized group. I'm like, one, these are one and the same. Many of us are queer ourselves.
Yeah.
So much of my community obviously are queer spawn. So the fact that we're being hit up against it's so unethical, it's wrong. And as a very public advocate, I can say very confidently that the majority of recipient parents who are in my inbox asking for help, for advice, hands down are queer recipient parents. Like by and large, that's the majority of people in my comment section going, we want to do this right. We care about our child. We care about our future child. What can we do? Because the queer community is a marginalized group. They understand, they wanna be mindful and thoughtful, and these recipient parents who reach out to me, like, they warm my heart every single time I get one of these message, as I always message them back, and I'm just like, "I just want you to know the fact that you're even asking this, like, means the world to me. This says so much about, like, how much of, like, an amazing parent you are. I'm here to support you, and I love and whatever you need, I'm here for." And I just it warms my heart because you see such beautiful intentions already there, and the fact that the powers that be are trying to create this false narrative that just isn't there
Yeah, I think it's
is
been where
horrible.
that these are our families and
Yeah,
we're passionate, but we want what's best for everybody. And a lot of times these messages are coming from people who are not part of our families and who are not personally affected by this. This is somebody who's selling sperm in a bank and it
yeah.
doesn't affect their family. It affects ours.
And it's the this is all one and the same. Like we're all want the best family structure. We want the healthiest option for future donor conceived children. I want recipient parents to be protected. I want donors to be protected because just right now they're not. What the fertility industry is doing is not best practices for us. It's best practices for them and their income.
Right.
And it's and as you said, you have to listen to the people with the lived experience. Never in the history of the earth can we ever look back and go, it was the right decision to defend a multi-billion
Yeah.
dollar industry from being as unregulated as possible and to ignore the voices of the lived experience. Like that's never happened.
There's a great quote, and I won't say it correctly, but I think it says something about radical empathy is listening to the lived experiences of a person rather than imagining how you would feel in their situation.
Ooh, I love that.
And whoever says this, it's about me.
But I love that, and I think that I mean, obviously, that's true with any kind of group that is trying to find their voice. I mean, that is just what we have seen across humankind, that we make the best progress when we actively are listening and giving the microphone to the people with the lived experience and listening to the community as a whole. And, I love the fact that you have taken your lived experience and you're like, "I want to provide better."
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, I feel the same way, like, I love my parents, and I wish that they had better. I wish they had better options, and I do this work for them
Mhm.
because they deserved better, all recipient parents deserve better. I have so much empathy for people going through infertility trauma or, who are like, this is their only way to family build. I want you so much to build your family. I just want you to build it in the best, safest way possible.
Absolutely.
Um, any other final thoughts before we say goodbye?
No, I think that this was a great conversation. I really enjoyed being here.
Enjoyed you being here too. And if how could okay, if somebody is listening to this and they're going like, how do I find the right lawyer? How can they do that?
So I would definitely check out Quad A. It's really for attorneys, and that's an organization throughout the United States that has a assist reproduction attorneys in the state. So you can look state by state for who is part of this professional organization. You can also always contact me. I can be available at www.troxlaw.com. And if I can't help you because of the state you're in, I can put you in touch with a colleague.
And I don't know if this is a question. How, because I think, so many people go to the Facebook donors because of cost.
Yeah.
Hiring a lawyer to
Mhm.
do this kind of contract,
Mhm.
and I'm sure it's gonna be different per lawyer, per state, but
Yeah.
on average, how much does this cost?
Depends. I would say, it probably costs a couple $1,000s
Okay.
altogether to make sure that the intended parents and the donor are both represented.
Mhm.
Usually donors charge flat fees for that. And it varies by state, it varies by attorney. At the end of the day, it's less expensive than what happens down the line if you do things, DIY and then you end up in court. We're much less expensive than litigators.
Well, and also, I mean, if you do go to the cryobanks, you could be easily spending $2,000 per vial of sperm.
Right.
So, I mean, it in many ways, it it kind of, I would say there's no way to do this with zero cost.
No, I mean, there's always going to be a cost associated, but a lot of us, are really in this to help.
Mhm.
I didn't get into fertility law because it's the most, financially rewarding
Yeah.
attorney position. There's certainly, there are other things I could have done. I do it because I really do want to help, and certainly for people who have financial need or have a history of seeking fertility treatments without success, and have a financial need as a result of that. I'm always happy to work with people because at the end of the day, I care about this industry. I care about the people involved. I care about the people affected. I want everyone to be doing it right. And sometimes there's even pro bono services for people who really do need it.
That's incredible. And oh my God, there was one more question. Ah, oh no, no, oh no, my brain in my 30s is not helping me now. Um, we're gonna hang up the call and then I'm gonna be like, God damn it, there it was. Um, oh yes, okay. And all of the same formula. If somebody was like, we're going to use my partner's brother,
Mhm.
you still absolutely would go, you must get a lawyer, even with family. You must do that.
Yes. I get that call all the time. Well, we're family, so it's never going to be an issue. And I mean, families have disputes.
Families have problems. I think we can see that very clearly.
And so that's why you really do need separate independent legal counsel. And then I also, this is sort of a side note, but sometimes we get, people who are siblings, like a woman donating to her sister or a man donating to his brother, and maybe they feel a lot of pressure to do it when they don't want to. And we sometimes have that where it's just hard to say no. And that's why you need a psychologist and attorney to really talk to them because there's so
Yeah.
much that can sort of disqualify them without it being, a no. So we want to make sure these are completely consenting situations, or
Consent is key.
let's say that it's a daughter donating to her mother, and her mother's in a second marriage. We want to make sure that
Wait,
yeah,
what?
yeah, that happens. We do have that.
Oh, that's complicated. That's really complicated.
Yeah,
Oh, oh,
we have those things come up, and I mean, I'm not going to touch it without a psych, a mental health professional talking to
oh.
everybody to make sure there's no coercion, to make sure that everybody's on the same page, because there are situations in which a person may feel that they can't say no. And we want to make sure that anyone who's moving forward any sort of donation is really doing it with a lot of thought. They understand the implications, and that they're consenting to that, and that takes some background work.
I'm not. Oh, that's gonna sit with me for a while. That one I'm gonna be thinking about now for a bit, going, oh,
Yeah.
that's a situation. That is a interesting Thanksgiving dinner. Okay. I mean, yeah, that one's complicated. I don't really know how to file that one yet. I gotta sit with that.
No problem.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, on that note,
Yeah.
okay, everybody, we're all gonna sort of sit with that one. Yeah, okay. All right. Whew. Yeah, no, consent. We're going to leave it at that one. Consent is key. I like that, making sure that like no one is feeling pressured. That I think is absolutely, because there's because I get a lot of messages from siblings saying my sibling is like in some ways demanding my eggs or my sperm, and I'm like, yeah, that ain't cool. That is not for them to demand. Those are yours. Those are yours, friend.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, Amanda, thank you again so much for not just the information that you have provided, which I think is so needed right now, but also your passion, your lived experience, and your willingness just to help. And I think that this is so important. It is so needed. And just thank you for everything that you are providing to our humanity.
Well, thank you for fighting the good fight as well.
We all are in our own little weird ways. I mean, you are being a prestigious lawyer and genuinely helping families, and I'm running around in a sperm suit, We all do what we can. I think arguably, you might have. I'm gonna pass this one off to you, saying I think what you're doing is slightly bare, but so thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good day.